Ladies and gentlemen, the 3 knockdown rule on Triller is back in effect. I'm Steve Kim, joined by belated Mario Lopez.
Belated Mario. I thought I was going to go with Baby New Year, being that I'm going to be hosting the New Year's Day parade.
Talk a little more
More
about
on
that.
that later. But shout out to the Korean Cosell, the Kimster is here, Smoking Tim Frazier and Buffalo Knuckles.
And Tino on the edits. All right, well, we got a lot to talk about. We missed last week, so let's backtrack just a little bit. December 18th from San Antonio on DAZN, light heavyweight matchup. Zurdo Ramirez, TKO in 10 over Yunieski Gonzalez, and also WBA women's minimumweight title, still held by Seniesa Estrada with a striking knockout over Maria Santizo in 4. Mario, you know my past criticisms of Zurdo Ramirez. I got a new nickname for him now. The human highlight film. He's become Mr. Excitement.
Look at that. He's made an about face. First of all, I want to give a quick shout out to San Antonio because that is a great fight city. They always come out. That was a nice full arena there. They're loud and boisterous and passionate. Seen some good fights there throughout the years. And yes, Zurdo has really made some huge strides with his young trainer, Julio, who we've talked about before. He's got him more offensive. He's got him letting his hands go. He had a tough guy in front of him. Back-to-back tough guys that don't really they didn't want to go easy into the night. They were there to kind of be to try to disrupt the apple cart there. So I like that Zurdo is being more aggressive and he's working the upstairs and downstairs, and he's a pretty elusive guy in there defensively too. You wouldn't think by looking at him, but he's got nice little pivots, nice little angles. The footwork is pretty much on point, and he seems to be always on balance. He had another impressive performance. That's 2 in a row now, and I feel or at least it seems inevitable that a B-Vol showdown should be in the works.
Right, and one thing about Gilberto Ramirez, can you say his last 2 guys, Sully B and Yunieski Gonzalez, were faded? Yes. But in the past, and I've said this about Gilberto Ramirez, he's that guy in the middle of the freeway that has a shiny new sports car, but he goes 55 right down the center of the road, and you're thinking to yourself, speed up, get out of the way, but just don't go 55 the whole time. At least now, he's stepping on the gas pedal, he's on his front foot, and he realizes style, points matter.
And you say these guys are faded, his opponents, but those are the guys that kind of realized it was their last hurrah, and they really went out there.
They're desperate.
And they were desperate, and when you're desperate, you're dangerous because they sort of gave it their all, and that's what I feel Yunieski, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, it did, and he was very emotional afterwards, and that was just a nice moment to kind of see, just to kind of point that out. I was out of the country when I saw that yet again, watching it on, thank God for iPads, but it was a fun fight to watch. I like the atmosphere, and I'm excited about the future of Zurdo in 2022.
Yeah, I got to give Gonzalez credit. He came out punching from his heels with those right hands, and he shook Ramirez a few times.
Yeah.
And the end of the 4th was incredible, the back-and-forth type of action. And again, Gonzalez is a faded veteran, but you're right. He had the sense of urgency, like, I got to make this work here. I'm not getting 15 more chances.
Which boded well for Zurdo in his development.
Yes.
I thought those were great fights to keep continue his development.
And as for Ramirez, now he's created a certain buzz. And we'll talk about his future a little bit more. You know, Maury, I'm not the biggest fan of women's boxing because I think a lot of women, they work hard, they're talented in a sense, and they're well-conditioned, but they don't always turn their punches over or lock out. Seniesa Estrada, I think her technique allows her to actually, like, she doesn't have the greatest knockout percentage, but she hits clean through her knuckles, and she turns them over. And once again, another eye-opening, entertaining effort by Miss Estrada.
Hey, she's, to me, the most exciting female fighter out there right now. With her performances, she's cute, she's entertaining, she's well-spoken. And, you know, there have been a couple of female fights that have been really well entertaining this year. We saw one not too long ago.
Michaela Mayer against Hamadouche was a war.
That was great.
Alicia Baumgardner with a bomb on Terry Harper.
This has been, I think, a pivotal year for women's boxing, and they really made their mark, as opposed to, and we've talked about this before, with the ladies over in MMA who have really took their place in the sport there. But I think Seniesa is definitely leading that charge, and I like that they're keeping her busy, too, on these cards.
Absolutely. This last weekend before Christmas was really busy. Let's go through the list. Fight review for that particular week. Friday, December 17th from Uzbekistan, Israel Madrimov with a controversial knockout over Michel Soro in 9, hitting him way after the bell. My understanding is that Soro and his team have filed a protest. Then Friday night in Montreal, the WBC and IBF light heavyweight champion of the world, Artur Beterbiev, bludgeons Marcus Browne in 9. Then Saturday afternoon in the UK, Joseph Parker with a 12-round war against Derek Chisora. Then Saturday, PBC on Fox from Minneapolis, David Morrell goes to 6-0, stopping Alontes Fox in 4. Mario, let's go to Beterbiev.
Before we go to Beterbiev, let me ask you a question, because you mentioned the protest. Have you ever heard of a situation when they have filed a protest and it's actually worked out for them?
The most it can go, and I actually think Sora has a very good shot, is to get an immediate rematch.
Okay, then it's worth it then.
Because this is a title eliminator.
Got it.
Because theoretically, this was for the number 1 and then mandatory to Charlo. Now, I will say this. I watched that fight on DAZN, and throughout that night, because there were other fights, you could never hear the bell.
Right.
Now, I got to give Madrimov a little bit of credit, because I've in the past, I've criticized him for trying to do too much instead of keeping it simple and being basic. He decided, you know what? I got to cut out the fancy stuff. I'm going to work in the pocket. And he started to break Soro down, hurt him late in the round. But the problem was the crowd gets loud. The bell is very muted. And this wasn't just 1 or 2 punches after the bell. It was about 7 or 8.
Yeah, full-on combinations. No, I get that. I was just wondering if the protests themselves actually have any sort of effect. But apparently it does. You've done your job if you can force that immediate rematch. So, okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. As far as Beterbiev, let's just jump to him right away.
What a wrecking ball.
My guy's impressive. I've been a fan of my guy when I saw what he did to Gvozdyk. Yeah. And I love his training. And he's got the Popeye forearms. And I've never seen someone do push-ups where he jumps and he goes to his wrists and then like karate chop. Just my hands hurt looking at that. Or get someone with a 45-pound dumbbell and he
twirls it like a baton.
Twirls it like a baton. That is some serious hand strength, and that's the kind of that country strength. He's the kind of guy that I don't care if he's just kind of playing with you, but he can like pick you up and throw you across the room, or when he hits you, it's gonna feel like you're getting hit with a bat. With all that said, he's still a fundamentally sound fighter. He's well schooled. He doesn't know how to lose. He's got a 100% knockout ratio. My God.
17 up, 17 down.
So incredibly impressive. And look, he suffered that nasty gash in this fight due to an accidental headbutt. But man, that was nasty. And it just seemed to sort of accelerate his game plan. It does take a minute to kind of get the wheels going there. But once he does, it's a vicious onslaught. And he is the most dangerous guy in that weight class.
Marcus Browne boxed well early, but eventually over time, this is like a wrecking ball. It's not about 1 or 2 swings, but over time, he starts to break the foundation, walls crumble in, and then you collapse. And it was the body blows of Beterbiev. However, here's the thing. Turned pro in 2013, only has 17 fights. There's been a lot of injuries, had COVID, a lot of stops and starts, managerial and promotional issues.
Sure.
So like you said, he's like a snowball. It takes a little bit of time to get rolling and build that momentum. I'm going to make a bold statement. Okay. I actually think Canelo, after 6 rounds, if they would meet at 175, Canelo would be up 5 rounds to 1 or 4 to 2. The question is what would happen in the second half of the fight, because when you fight Beterbiev, it's like the sands of time. It's not about just beating him. Can you actually outlast him? But I do think Canelo is a live dog because he's quicker off the trigger.
So do I, and defensively, he's so sound, and I think he can punch between those punches. Yep. Between his punches, and his feints will give him problems. With all that said, and I feel it better be if I put my managerial hat on, I would like to give him yet one more fight. Yeah. Because he hasn't been that busy before he were to face a Canelo, let's say, hypothetically. But you're right. I feel Canelo would be up in between the middle rounds, but then I think it gets very interesting because I think Beterbiev, to me, is an even stronger Golovkin. Yes. And look at all the fights that Canelo has had. The one that's given him the most problems has been Golovkin, where a lot of people felt he lost the first one. The second one, okay, gave him the nod, but still very, very competitive. But that stiff, very educated jab and those power shots made him sort of reluctant to want to come forward as much and engage, and he became more of a counterpuncher. The problem is, with Beterbiev, he's a much larger man, even much more so than Golovkin. Younger, stronger, in his prime, And he's the kind of guy that even if he's missing but hitting you on the shoulder or on the hips, that shit hurts and it's going to break you down and it's going to wear and it's going to take its toll eventually. Canelo, as talented as he is, he's not that big of a guy, especially for light heavyweight. Beterbiev's coming in about 6'1", kills himself to make that weight. Man, when he walks in that ring, he'll be about maybe 185, 190, something like that. And I just feel it gets really, really interesting because he doesn't have to hit often for it to be effective. So even one of his counters, I mean, he starts getting into that body. So yeah, Canelo can do it, but at some point, something's got to give.
Well, we know how slick Canelo has become with that front shoulder, a little bit of a Philly shell. Reminds me what I would do in terms of setting the game plan if I'm Mark Ramsey. An old fight, Rocky Marciano against Roland Lastarza. Marciano made the decision, okay, I'm not going to hit the head. I'm going to hit you all over the body and arms. Lastarza, at the end of that fight, had blood clots, had to be hospitalized. And you're right. Beterbiev's one of these guys, if he hits you on the bicep over a certain amount of time, hits you on the wrist, hits you in the shoulder. Anywhere. You're going to need 4 Advil later that night.
Or maybe,
Bottom line.
Or maybe a lot more. And he's well-conditioned.
Yes.
Dude doesn't get tired. He's like a snowball, and he seems to get more momentum. Now, with all that said, Canelo, very much live dog. That's the fight I'd probably most like to see this next year, and we'll get to that later. But if he is able to become victorious in that fight and somehow be undisputed at 175, then I think we're talking about Canelo as
legendary,
all-time greats, Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Not just of his generation, like ever.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Because
if he's able to be undisputed at 68 and be able to be undisputed at 175, then we're talking about guys like, he's up there, Mount Rushmore, undisputed
Roberto Duran type of stuff.
Of all time, right?
Because, look, he'd still have to beat Bivol and guys like that, but he'd be unified at 160 after he beat Golovkin. He had, I think, 3 or at least 4 of the major belts, consolidated 68. And if you beat Beterbiev, then you become a unified 2-time champion at light heavyweight with the chance to win all the belts. You're right. That becomes like start carving out that bust on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Joseph Parker outlasts Derek Chisora. Look, I respect Derek Chisora. He's one of the hardest men in boxing. I hope he retires, but he's made it clear he will fight on. And Mario, we saw David Morrell against Alontes Fox. 6 fights in, but I think it's clear out of all the PBC fighters, I think he's the best young boxer they have.
Well, he's the most exciting. He's still, and he's got a build for boxing. He's sort of like kind of the wiring that's Tommy Hearns, and he can crack. He's heavy-handed.
And he's southpaw.
The punches don't look as clean and I don't want to say they're coming across sloppy, but they're not as crisp.
Not fluid either.
They're not as fluid, but he lets his hands go. They're coming fast and furious, and he can crack. And he has a lot of confidence, and he's only, 7-8 fights in?
6-0.
Okay, 6-0. So he's got a lot of time to develop, but sky is the limit there with that kid.
Now, wrapping up this boxing weekend, and this was actually the most talked about event of that weekend on the 18th from Tampa, Florida. Showtime pay-per-view was the rematch, and Jake Paul devastates Tyron Woodley in 6 rounds with a devastating right hand. Mario, let's get this out of the way. I don't think that Woodley did Greg Louganis. I don't think he took a dive. I think that's an insult.
Is that a rumor?
Yes, people are actually insinuating that this was a fix.
Look, if you're going to, let's assume he took a dive, he's not going to want to go out like that. Because my guy turned into a meme, and it's now, wow, it's going to be, God bless Woodley.
Something he has to live with the rest of his life.
Bless his heart. Yeah. Jake Paul, it was a bit of a wrestling match prior to that. And look, I give Jake credit for just stepping in there. He did a nice little feint to the stomach, came over with that overhand right. Bang, and caught him. That was a real punch. He's a lot bigger than Woodley, naturally, too. And Woodley, I believe, is like 40, 41. With all that said, not to take anything away, he got in there, did what he said he was going to do. We know he likes to talk a lot. And he ended the year in high note. My guy was busier than a lot more active fighters this year. Fought more.
3 fights in 2021.
Fought more than most of the fighters this year.
Yeah.
So say what you will, but hey, he was an active fighter and really backed up what he said and I think sort of raised the awareness level for the sport. And we'll get into maybe how good he is for the sport, quote unquote, a little later. But I think Paul now has his all-time sort of confidence, and a lot of people have been giving him a hard time, of course, about he hasn't fought a real fighter. Well, the name that I'm excited about, and I can't wait if it happens, is Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. because of many reasons. First, he can wipe clean all the hate and animosity people have toward Chavez Jr.
By standing up for the honor of boxing.
If he knocks out, especially in a devastating fashion, Jake Paul. Honestly, I think it all goes away. If he knocks out Jake Paul, I think it all goes away. However, we're talking about one of the most undisciplined fighters that I've seen in quite some time. And look, I didn't think he was going to lose to Anderson Silva. And Anderson Silva does know how to box, and he's one of the best, the greatest in the MMA, and he was on the Brazilian boxing team, so it's not like he was a chump either. But I hope he knows that he couldn't show his face anywhere. And the thing that bothers me is that I think if they give him money up front, I don't know how hard he'll train. I really hope that if he trains hard, if he just trains and not in a kitchen, but in a gym, I think there's no way he can lose this fight, right? Now, granted, he's still a lot smaller than Paul. He's not. Paul walks around on like 200, whatever. He cuts to 190. He doesn't even make 190. He comes in like 192, 193. But Chavez is a big kid. He probably 190. He'll be fine. Look, if Canelo couldn't knock out Chavez, what makes you think Jake Paul is?
That's a good point.
So I think if he's there, head and chest, he starts. I haven't seen anybody give a hook to the liver to Paul because no one knows how to fight because no one's been a boxer right there. So if Chavez is there, puts his head in his chest and starts whipping those hooks to the liver, and he's able to break him down, and dude, he wins everyone's back, and I think he could do it. But again, the variable here is we're talking about one of the most undisciplined, not focused fighters that I've seen in a long time. So it's kind of crazy to think that's half the card, but that's what makes it so interesting. I'm actually excited about this.
If Julio Jr. takes this assignment, if I'm the father, the legendary JC superstar, I tell him, son, our family honor and name is on the line.
You hit him with that?
I am training you.
Ooh.
No. I'm actually going to be living with you. In fact, we're going to have bunk beds. I'm going to be in charge of your life. And I'm going to have security surrounding you. You are not embarrassing the family name. That's how seriously I would take it.
Come on, dude. You would think the Mexican pride in and of itself, he's not going to allow.
Has he shown a lot of Mexican pride
No.
last
Just because
5
in this,
years?
Listen, but I'm just saying, just because in this particular instance, you know what I mean? Those other guys are at least real fighters, right? In this particular instance, he's got to be motivated. And I hope he recognizes and someone sits him down and say, look, all the clowning, all this crap that you can make it all go away. You knock this kid out.
Yeah.
You could do it.
And you know what else I tell him? If I'm Julio Sr., you lose this fight, son. I love you, but you're dead to me. I'm raising the stakes here, man.
You're
raising the stakes.
I'm actually really excited about the possibility of this happening. I'm actually really excited about
Jorge
this.
Masvidal is a guy that I like. He's a personality. And he's saying, you're not going to lowball me. Now, wait a minute. If you're offering $5 million, what is Dana paying him?
Masvidal, but he's a smaller guy too.
But are there UFC issues contractually from what you know of?
Yes, I believe so. Because actually, somebody who can box, another great chin who actually can box, is Nate Diaz. Too, I would actually love to see that against Nate Diaz, but he just signed another contract with UFC. So those fights aren't happening. But no, with Julio, dude, I actually would be excited about that. I know you would be too.
Would that be the biggest fight you could make on Cinco de Mayo, regardless of what Canelo does?
I'd watch that. I'm being honest. I'd watch that because it's like the circus came to town all in one, just the novelty and the appeal, and people be you know what I mean? Yeah. Can you think if he knocks that kid out? You'd imagine like just the memes you'd see in social media the next day.
Then I'd get Logan Paul to fight Omar Chavez. Make it a whole family.
Those kids are big. The Paul kids are big.
Okay, so you've made yourself clear. I just. If this can't motivate Chavez Jr.,
wouldn't you rather see Chavez Jr. fight him than this the other Fury kid?
Yes.
That's more his size, by the way.
I think it does better business.
Yeah, so do I.
Much better business.
So do I.
Moving on, news and notes. February 5th on pay-per-view, it's the return of Keith Thurman against Mario Barrios. Leo Santa Cruz is on that card. And date to be announced in March. Welterweight unification, Errol Spence takes on Ordenis Ugas. Mario, to set the stage here, this Saturday from Hollywood, Florida, there's a heavyweight card with like Charles Martin and Louis Ortiz presented by PBC. That's a lower-priced pay-per-view. Now you got February 5th, and you got Spence Ugas. What happened to free boxing?
Well, yeah, what happened with
that? Kind of
that?
Expensive now.
Well, and honestly, I don't see them doing any sort of business with respect to the fighters just because Thurman has been pretty absent. these last couple
Hasn't
of
fought
years.
in 2+
Yeah,
years.
exactly. Now you're asking people to shell out, and they're going to be like, who?
Well, here's the other thing. Thurman lost his last fight to the legendary Pacquiao. Barrios got knocked out by a guy whose last fight, Tank, was at 35. Leo Santa Cruz got knocked into space by Tank. So that means 3 of the 4 fighters in the main and co-main have lost.
Yeah.
That's almost unprecedented.
Give me your money.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
then,
they're asking.
And then as it relates to Spence Ugas, look, I am not going to downgrade that fight. That's a matchup between 2 of the 3 or 4 best welterweights in the world.
I have no problem with
However, here's the issue. This fight was mandated or licensed by the WBA because Emona Stanionis stepped aside. But the BA said to Spence and Ugas, okay, the winner of this fight has to fight the winner of Stanionis against Ruzab Batayev, which is going to be a war. You know what that means, though? The Terrence Crawford fight against Errol Spence, my sideburns are safe. It's not going to happen until at least 2023.
No,
so
what do you mean 23?
So there is a bright side.
No, we can have it towards the end of 22. Why?
You really think Errol Spence will fight 3 times this upcoming year? You think he's going to fight in March? Then Stanionis, Batayev, whoever the winner of that is, that'll probably take up. Look,
You don't think step-aside money could come into play?
No. I believe, look, this is going to be somewhat controversial, but there seems to be more and more people who make this statement. Errol Spence is doing everything he can to sidestep Terrence Crawford.
Exactly
and you know what? I agree.
Look,
I agree.
You said could he fight 3 times
He
in a
could,
year?
but he won't. But he won't.
Jake Paul fought 3 times. That's what I would tell every
Well,
promoter. I'm like, yo,
that's the face
Jake
of
Paul,
boxing.
you know what I mean?
That's the
Jake
face
Paul
of
fought 3
boxing.
times. You can fight 3 times. Isn't that sad?
No,
Think
it
about
is sad. Look, here's the issue, though. If you look at Errol Spence the last 4 years, I think he's fought 3 times.
That's my point.
Yeah, and
I
so
think what excuse? Well, no, my guy had an accident. My guy, I get it.
and all we heard from Terrence Crawford, his detractors, he's on the wrong side of the street. In other words, he's with Bob Arum, Top Rank. That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So why is Errol Spence playing crossing guard? You can make the fight. And I get it. Now, maybe he says, okay, if I beat Ugas, I'm going to dump the WBA. Terrence, let's get going. But look, what has given you any indication that Errol Spence wants to make that fight with Crawford sooner rather than later?
No, I'm just hoping the pressure and the demand for it finally comes to a head. And after Ugas, that fight happens. Because then after that, it's like spoiled milk.
Yes.
It's expired.
Mario, one quick thing here. I spoke to a source at Golden Boy, and I asked him what is going on with Ryan Garcia. And I was told he wants us to make the fight with Isaac Pitbull Cruz. We want to do it in April. We've sent the offers out. They seem very serious. If they make that fight, you know what? I'll give them a little bit of credit. They're coming back with the real guy.
Real guy. I mean, it's a guy, would you say, is tailor-made for him? Since Ryan's pretty big for that weight class and much easier to sort of.
I wouldn't say tailor-made.
I don't know because is that little quick left hook that he has too. I feel like as he's trying to come in and get in there, I feel Ryan. It would seem
Coming off a long layoff.
No. I'm saying aside from all that,
yeah.
I'm just talking about styles.
Maybe
you would think so. Yeah, look, I have no problem with that fight, or if it's the Jojo Diaz fight. I think he can get back on track. He's been talking a lot and posting a lot that he's planning on fighting at least 3 times this year. So why not both of them?
Yeah, and by the way, Ryan, if you're going to post more training footage, no more Cobra bag. I've had enough of the Cobra bag.
Mix
My
it
God,
up.
you wear those things out like a toothbrush.
Yeah,
anyway.
they're hard on him on those comments.
I
too.
know. One last thing here. Noted ring announcer David Diamante late last week got into a motorcycle accident, and it was pretty serious. He is recovering. Just want to send our best wishes out to him. One of the very best ring announcers and a very good guy. So, David, certainly our thoughts and prayers are with you. All right, when we come back on the 3 knockdown rule on Triller, we go to Ask Mario and Final Flurries. All right, we're back on the 3 knockdown rule on Triller. Steve Kim, Mario Lopez. We go to the Ask Mario segment of this fine program. Here's one from Derek Batista. Hey, Steve and Mario, what would a Beterbiev versus Zurdo matchup look like? And would Zurdo have the durability to make it to the end?
Ooh, that's a really, really good question and an interesting matchup too. Look, we've already discussed how tough and strong and durable Beterbiev is. And the thing about Zurdo is he's a big guy even for that weight class too. And like I mentioned, he does have really nice footwork, and I love the angles.
The pivots.
The pivots. He is elusive in there. He'd have to box his ass off and really keep him at a distance. That's a tough tall order. I would, to quote my guy from Rocky, he's all wrong for us, baby. We don't need that kind of man in our life.
All right, if I was Julian Chua, you know how I feel about the excitement level? If I was Julian Chua, I would tell Zurdo going into this fight, Zurdo, go back to being boring.
No, you have to.
We are boxing, and if the crowd gets loud and starts booing, I don't give a damn. Be boring on this particular night. This is not the guy to try to be exciting against.
No, that's where the footwork, the angles, the southpaw stance,
spacing,
the jab,
spacing.
Really, he's got to pitch a shot out for that one.
Here's one from Indy Spanglish. If Santa could have brought you any 3 fights for the upcoming year, which ones would you have asked for? I think Bivol versus Zurdo is one that I think needs to happen. The winner of that squarely becomes a prime contender in the Canelo sweepstakes.
That's an interesting fight. I don't know how exciting it'd be, to be honest, but I do want to see it. I would put Canelo and Beterbiev. Okay. I'd still want to see Canelo Benavidez as well. Dude, Jake Paul, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. You're laughing.
You are on that one.
I really want to see that one.
I want to see Virgil Ortiz and/or Jaron Boots Ennis get a shot at a welterweight title, if not face each other within 18 months.
Well, you stole my thing. I was going to say that one, and of course, Spence Crawford.
And I think Tyson Fury against Alexander Usyk.
Oh, that'd be yeah.
I don't want to be disrespectful to Anthony Joshua, but I don't know. Do you agree or disagree? It doesn't matter who's in the corner for Anthony Joshua. Usyk is all wrong for him. That's a tough style.
You know, he bounced back. Yeah, it's not a comfortable fight for him. He bounced back well with after the Andy Ruiz loss. So let's see if he does the same this time.
How about a fight with Jaime Munguia and either Jermall Charlo or Gennady Golovkin? This kid's improved a lot. I'd like to see him at a certain level where you're like, hey, let's see what you got.
Love both of those fights, and still bummed that Golovkin didn't get to fight Murad in Japan.
Right, it's supposed to be this week, by the way.
I know.
Carlos Ortiz asks, Jake Paul, is he a great thing for boxing or not?
I don't think he's bad. I think anytime there's boxing mentioned, whether it be social media or on the sports show, I think it's great. Continues to just sort of raise the awareness level to people that may not be familiar with it. Sort of like that old adage, all press is sort of good press. So I don't think he's bad at all.
I spoke to 2 people that were at the Amalie Arena in Tampa that night. And one thing stood out to both. He said, Steve, literally 80% of the audience, they were inside the venue from almost the beginning.
So like a UFC fight.
And they were all under the age of 25. See, now that's where boxing has an issue in terms of developing the next fan base or the next generation. It skews very old. Now, do I think they were all paying attention to Amanda Serrano and some of the other undercard fights? Probably not. But I do wonder, what is the retention rate for all of these people that suddenly get interested for Jake Paul, whether it's buying pay-per-view or buying a ticket? How many of them then want to say, hey, ESPN Plus has fights? See, that's the unknown, is the retention rate of how many real fans are we creating of boxing, or is it just specifically to the Paul brothers?
I think it's
That's
irrelevant.
the question.
That's a variable, of course, but I think it's irrelevant. I think we should enjoy it for what it is and take advantage while it's here.
Yes. Here's one from Ignacio Ortiz. What do you guys think of Jaime Munguia taking on Demetrius Ballard next? And is Mario reserving his tickets for Chocolatito Gonzalez against Juan Francisco Estrada in beautiful San Diego? I heard that might be March 5th.
That's a good weekend to visit mom and dad.
Oh, I like that.
Down there.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, as for Munguia, he was supposed to fight Ballard before. I think Ballard got COVID. Now, here's the interesting thing going back to Munguia. He's number 1 in the WBC and the WBO. The WBO is Andrade, who's a very tough champion, but Andrade has a mandatory against Janibek, trained by Buddy McGirt, the Kazakh. The WBC champion is Jermall Charlo. My question is to Golden Boy, there's a kid with over 40 fights. He's now in his mid-20s, finding his stride with Eric Morales. At what point do you roll the dice and say, kid, swim in the ocean?
I think it's coming this year, too. I really like the way he looked against Rosado, and I think he's made great strides with Morales, and I love that matchup. Love those guys. I would, in a perfect world, I think the title shot comes at the end of 2022. So
that means 2 more fights then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Would you have a problem with that?
No, I wouldn't.
I think that'd be a great game plan for him.
Yeah, and Mario, as relates to Estrada Chocolatito, I've said for a long time that San Diego's been an underused boxing market, proximity to Mexico, major city in San Diego with a lot of Latins, not too far of a drive from LA, and it's a great city. I'd like to see it. I don't know if they're going to have it at the Pachanga Arena, not the Pachanga Casino. There's always
well, there's fights there too, by the way. That's why I was confused last time we talked.
But look, March 5th, if it's there, I will make the 2-hour drive.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can Uber with me if you want. Mario,
Uber.
final flurries. Had a very nice, enjoyable Christmas with you guys and the family and friends. And we did something because, quite frankly, the Vito Melnicki was taking way too long to knock out his guys. And we said, you know what? Let's watch some other boxing. You punched up the YouTube on your big screen TV. And I have to tell you, it was a fun time on a Christmas night just watching the great Julio Cesar Chavez.
Well, before Chavez, let me point out, because I had wanted to see it, I never saw Ike Ibeabuchi versus David Tua. That might have been one of the most exciting heavyweight fights I think I've seen. Honestly, as far as heavyweights, both fighters threw over 1,200 punches. Two huge guys in their prime, both undefeated, throwing bombs round after round. I mean, I was really impressed. Weren't you, Kim? And it made me think, wow, what if with Ibeabuchi? Tua was like 27-0 and had 23 knockouts. Ibeabuchi was, I believe, 17-0?
16 or 17-0.
17-0 with like 13, 14 knockouts. You don't see that sort of matchup anymore. He ended up winning a unanimous decision against Tua, and then he beat and knocked out Chris Bird in vicious fashion.
In middle rounds.
Yes, and two very, very different styles. And I'm like, man, why couldn't we see him against Rigbo, Lennox Lewis? Because the guy was like 6'2", 240, 35, built like an Adonis, but then he goes and
couldn't beat one opponent.
No, he goes and tries to kill someone, and then then he goes on. It's like, what? But that's one of the great what ifs in heavyweight history. But man, that fight was awesome, and I'm glad.
And by the way, that took place at the Arco Arena in Sacramento, promoted by Don Shargan. And if I'm not mistaken, the main event that night was Jose Luis Lopez -3 in a memorable fight against Aaron Superman Davis.
That wasn't even the main event.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. No, that was very, very impressive. And then we threw on some vintage Chavez. We saw him probably at his peak when he beat very heavy-handed, tough, dangerous Edwin Rosario, but didn't just beat him, broke his soul and beat him to a pulp, and they ended up stopping it, and his face was just a mess. And then hopped over and watched the two Chavez-Mayweather fights. One where he knocked
And by the way,
out.
we mean Roger not
Mayweather,
Floyd.
right. Roger, who was dangerous, and they used to call him the Mexican Assassin, the original Black Mamba. First guy to come out with a sombrero, too. He was an OG, and he let his hands go, and that second fight was exciting, too. And I always say it's more degrading to get beaten to the point where you don't want to answer the bell and come out of the corner than it is to get knocked out. Because they said, oh, he caught me with a good shot, I got knocked out. But when you literally there and they're asking you, do you want to come out, and you're shaking your head no, that means he broke your will, he broke your spirit. You just don't want anymore. That you succumbed.
That night when he beat Chapo Rosario, I think that he was one of the top 2 or 3 lightweights that ever lived. I think he could have hung in there with Henry Armstrong, Roberto Duran. I think he would have fared much better against Pernell Whitaker at that weight. And this is what's interesting about Chavez. At that age, when he first fought Mayweather the first time in 1985, that fight was on CBS. He was 23 years old. He had 46 fights. So go 2 years later.
46 fights.
By the time he fights Rosario in the fall of 1987,
he's 54.
He's about 24 fights, or 24, 25 years old. He had 56 fights.
Or 56, my God.
And here's the thing.
And by the way, look at his face.
Right.
Clean as a whistle.
And by the time he fought Meldrick Taylor in 1990, he was 68-0 at 26, 27 years old. This is the point I want to make. Is that
compare that to these fighters today.
Young fighters today, they always talk about when they fight twice a year at age 14-0 and 50. Oh man, I've been training a lot and I've been doing. I go, great. You know what you're good at? To steal a phrase from Allen Iverson, practice.
Yeah,
you're good at practice, man. We ain't talking about fights. We're talking about practice. Because if you look at the way Chavez fight, and the most underrated thing about what he did was his elusiveness inside, his bend, his ability to move his head and his waist, and to be right in front of you and to block parry. Put his head right next to your head, mirror your head movement, and just grind you up. You have to have a certain confidence to do that, but you have to do it a lot. It's one thing to be in there with big headgear and big gloves, and you do that for 6-7 months in between fights. By the time you get to a fight, and I've talked to trainers about this, these guys all of a sudden look at these small gloves, and they're like, oh, geez. But if you do it often enough, it becomes second nature.
You're exactly right, Kim. And that's why he was so good, because he fought so often.
Right.
And there was such a confidence there and such a relaxation. My guy looked so smooth and loose and just supremely confident, and it was so in charge of his instrument.
Yeah.
His whole body, it was so impressive. And you're right, you only get that from fighting. Chavez, even a James Toney when he used to fight like 7 times
From 91
a
to
year.
94. Last American champion that really took non-title fights. Against Rosario, he gave an exhibition on pressure fighting, taking away space, smothering, and just basically breaking a guy down with both hands.
Beautiful.
This is how active Chavez was when he was really disciplined, because his personal life spiraled out of control in the 90s. But everyone always talks about Meldrick Taylor when he beat him in March 17th, 1990. Obviously a bad stoppage. We could talk about that later.
You're so
but
full of crap.
did you know, Mario, that at the end of the year in December, he actually was the co-feature on HBO to my uncle, a Korean who just got devastated in 3 rounds. He had 3 fights in between that, from 2 HBO appearances in March to December. And here's the funniest thing. The fight before the Mike Tyson undercard appearance, he had fought 4 weeks earlier against Russell Mosley. You tell a guy now, hey, you got an HBO fight, and he just said, yeah, well, a couple weeks before, I'm still going to do this fight here in Mexico. Nowadays, I think contractually they tell you, you can't take a fight 90 days before this. No. Chavez just said, this is my craft, this is my job, I'm going to get better on it. I think fighters today are very good at practicing and training and drilling. I don't know how good. I don't think we'll ever get full-fledged developed fighters anymore.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. That, they often speak about athletes being so much better in this era, right? When football players, basketball players, I could see that. I think fighters are the only one where you can go back yesteryear, especially because we're dealing with weight classes, and they're just as good, if not better, than their modern athlete. Is that fair to say?
I think they're better athletically, but they're not better technically or fundamentally. Because you're right, because football players are always going to play 16 to 17 games, basketball 82, baseball 162. We've gone from an era when guys used to fight 6, 7, 8 times and maybe 3, 4 times. All of a sudden, you got kids like Teofimo Lopez this past year, fought 1 time.
Ryan Garcia, 1 time.
1 time. And I'm just thinking, how do you get better?
Right.
I don't think you can. And I just think Chavez, to me, he's actually underrated in retrospect. If you really look at the depth of his career, especially in his prime, which was really from 30 to 35. Mario, this Saturday morning, I will make a prediction. You're going to wake up earlier than most of us. You got to play. You got a gig there. Got a gig.
Well, I'm gonna host the New Year's Day parade in Pasadena. It's the 106th annual, something crazy. It's been going on forever. But yeah, you're right. They want me there at 5:30 in the morning for an 8 o'clock show because they said the traffic is so bad. Right? It's supposed to be pretty chilly. So we'll have rain leading up to that, but then it's supposed to be a pretty day. So from 8 to 10 a.m., we're live. Check out your boy on NBC. What's that?
Did they actually have the parade last year? I forget. Did they go through with all the festivities?
I think they did, but without the crowd. This year we're gonna have the crowd. But yeah, but my kids are excited, because they're right in that wheelhouse.
I've been at Pasadena during New Year's times. I've actually spent the New Year's Day there watching bowl games with a friend about 5 years ago. One thing you always see is whatever Big Ten team is in town, and this time it's Ohio State, you will see thousands of Ohio State, and they'll all be wearing short sleeves. Those people, it'll be like 50 degrees, and they'll be wearing shorts, and we'll be dressed like
I remember when Wisconsin.
We'll be in parkas, and you feel like, what are you wearing? Like their blood's a little bit thicker than ours.
Right.
By the way, binge watching, I just started. I know I'm like 20 years late. Band of Brothers.
Bro,
wow,
what's
what
the
a show.
matter
That was
with
good.
you, dude?
Watch the first
That is so
wow.
crazy. You haven't watched Yellowstone yet, huh?
Not yet. I tried to get on it. You know what? The first 3 seasons, they don't offer it on demand. They start with season 4.
You got to get Peacock. You can binge it all right now.
Peacock.
Peacock, you get the new Yellowstone and you get the new Saved by the Bell. You got to watch both of them. Come on, support your boy, you rat bastard.
Yeah, I might have to do that.
You got to do it. You got to watch that. I'm, on the heels of that, going to binge 1883, the prequel.
Now, what's that about?
That's the prequel to Yellowstone, on how John Dutton's great-grandfather came to get the territory and the land and with the Indians and the whole. It's great, or it looks great at least. I haven't checked it out. But yeah, I finally finished Billions. By the way, I was fine with no axe. How you gonna have that show?
Are you gonna axe it from the
Dude,
rotation?
I'm telling you,
I don't think it's gonna be as good. But again, he had a great personal reason.
Yeah,
though,
and I'm gonna start Succession now too.
Ooh.
I finished. So now I'm all Succession and 1883 are my next 2.
I'll be honest. Without Axe, I don't know if Billions is worth going on. By the way, in Band of Brothers, Axe is in there.
Really?
He's winners.
who is also in Homeland. You know that,
Yeah,
right?
he's a pretty good actor.
He's great.
Had a good run.
British guy.
This is the last show of 2021.
Huh. We're still going to do a year review.
Yes,
though.
next week, hopefully bring in a special guest. We got
Yes.
to confirm it to
Our
talk
last
about.
show. Yeah, see, I don't care what these guys say about you, Kim. I
You're
think
not a
all
bad
right.
guy. You're not a bad
Yeah,
guy.
that's
Shut
right.
up. All right. Anyway, that's it for this week's edition of the 3 Knockdown Rule on Triller. On behalf of Mario Lopez, Tim, Frazier, and Buffalo Knuckles, and Tino, goodbye, everybody.